Hello and welcome to Unit 3, Natural Capital KPIs. In this unit, we're going to look at the different types of KPIs that can be used to measure the environmental performance of a company or its impact on natural capital. To do so, we're going to look at the disclosure requirements for the GRI on a number of its topics. The first of which we'll look at is energy. So why energy to start? Well, no matter how big or small a company is or what it does, it will use energy in some form, either through fuels or electricity or for heating, lighting, or refrigeration. It is also a cost for most companies. So what can we measure? First thing to think about is what can we measure within the organization? And the first types of measures we can calculate are absolute measures. So what was the total amount of fuel consumed within an organization? What is the total amount of electricity, heating, cooling, or steam consumption within the company? We can combine these all into the total energy consumption within an organization. So this will give us an measure of the absolute energy use in the company. Then we might want to get some more granular data, and we might want to subdivide this absolute measure by its composition. So we might want to ask the question of the fuel that is used by the business, how much of it comes from renewable sources and how much comes from non-renewable sources. So this will give us another KPI that gives us an insight into the fuel mix of the business. This brings us to our first ratio, where we can have the percentage of energy from renewables. Of all the energy that the company uses, what percent comes from renewable sources and what percent comes from non-renewable sources. By looking at this measure over time, we can see if the company is improving. Are they finding more renewable sources of energy year on year? Or compared to their competitors, do they have more renewable energy in their energy mix? So by subdividing these absolute measures, we can get a bit more information about the company's performance. Once we've measured what's going on within the organization, the next step is to measure the impact of the organization through its value chain. This includes the upstream and downstream activities. So in relation to energy, it's asking about the energy consumption outside the organization. So the first thing to consider is what is the energy consumption of the company's suppliers or its upstream activities. This can include the energy consumption that is contained with the products and services that the company buys, the fuel and energy-related activities for transport and distribution to the company, business travel, and employees commuting. This can be an important composition of the energy use of a company if they outsource a lot of the production. Also, for SMEs, this is important to consider because if an organization is required to report on its upstream activities, a lot of these upstream activities will be SMEs, and hence they will be required to supply the information to the organization for their reporting processes. Next, we can think about what is the impact of the company through its downstream activities, through the distribution, sale, and use of the company's product. So this would include things like downstream transportation, the processing of goods, the use of the goods, and then the end-of-life treatment of the goods. So what happens to them at the end of their life? Are they recycled? Are they reused? Are they part of the circular economy? Or are they disposed? The next category of KPIs are relative KPIs, and the example that we'll cover is energy efficiency. So this offers greater insights into the company's performance by answering two important questions. First, is the company becoming more or less efficient? Are they using more or less resources to create $1 of revenue? And how efficient is the company in comparison to its peers? Because companies come in all shapes and sizes, if we want to measure the performance of a company with another company that is of a different size, first we need to scale the measure in order so we're comparing like with like. And this is what energy intensity and other relative KPIs measure. So energy intensity puts the absolute amount of energy consumed and divides it by some sort of organization-specific measure. So this could be revenue, sales, units of production, production volumes, or number of full-time employees. So it's answering the question is, how much energy does the company use to create $1 of revenue, or how much energy does the company use to create 1 unit of product? So this gives us a way to compare companies that are of different sizes and also to measure the efficiency of the company. The next category of KPIs that can be measured relates to the progress made by the company. They answer the question, what have you done? This can be answered in relation to the company itself. When it comes to energy, it would be the amount of energy reduction the company has achieved over a given period due to initiatives such as process redesign, retrofitting of equipment, changes in behavior, and operational changes. It does not relate to things such as a reduction in activity. So if a company, let's say, sells less because there's an economic downturn, this is not progress towards reducing its impact. The second way this can be answered is, what has the company done to reduce the impact of its customers? So in the case of energy, what is the reduction in energy requirements of its products and services? Now that we've seen the different types of measures we can use in relation to energy consumption, let's turn our attention to another dimension of environmental performance, greenhouse gas emissions. GRI state that a company should measure its direct Scope 1 emissions. These are the emissions that are created within the business. Its energy indirect or Scope 2 emissions, which also include the emissions created when the energy the company used was generated. And finally, its Scope 3 emissions, or other indirect emissions that include things such as the emissions that are created when the product of the company is used. So we can see that these measures are similar to those for energy consumption. They're absolute measures, and they measure both within the organization and within its value chain or outside the organization. The second type of measure that can be used are relative measures. So greenhouse gas emissions intensity, where we scale either Scope 1, 2, or 3 emissions by some organization-specific metric, such as units of production or revenue. This gives us an idea of the efficiency of the company. So how much emissions do they create per euro of revenue? It also allows us to compare companies that are at different sizes. The third type of measure we can look at is the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, answering the question, what have you done? So this, like before, is a progress measure. Having looked at the KPIs that can be used to measure performance along both the energy and greenhouse gas emission dimensions of environmental performance, we can see that there are common types of KPIs that can be applied to nearly any sustainability-related topic. First, we have absolute measures. Then we have absolute measures broken down by their composition to give more granular insight into the performance of the company. Then we can look at the performance of the company within and outside the company. So within the organization itself and then within its value chain. Next, we can look at relative measures, which scale some measure of absolute performance to give us an insight into, let's say, the efficiency of the company, or to allow us to compare the performance of one company against another company of different size. Finally, we have measures of progress made. So how has the company improved or disproved over a given period of time? Thanks for your time and attention. See you in the next unit.